As a constitutional law attorney, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Good evening and welcome to SNC Tonight. I'm Jenna Ellis, and a major decision has come out of the Alabama Supreme Court that held in the majority that embryos are actually children under the law. The Alabama Supreme Court said that it applies to all unborn children regardless of their location. The court issued this majority decision in a lawsuit that was brought forth by parents who were part of in vitro fertilization of embryos that were destroyed in December of 2020. So obviously this is a great pro-life decision, and it's right because children are children, human beings are human beings, regardless of their location, whether that's in the womb, out of the womb, whether that's in the air, the land, or the sea. It doesn't matter your location. Your rights should still be protected. So joining me now to discuss all this and more is Auron Macintyre, who is a contributor and columnist at The Blaze. Auron, I think this is probably going to be challenged, but at least the Alabama Supreme Court got this one right.
It is a very interesting decision. Obviously, this is a part of pro-life ideology that is challenged by some. They're uncomfortable with the idea of messing with people's ability to have children, have assistance having children, but it also is more ideologically consistent. It makes more sense with a pro-life message. And so it's interesting to see how this will develop, whether it will have kind of the same force, the same political force that other pro-life positions have, or whether it will create any kind of split inside a pro-life coalition.
Yeah, really well said. And I think it'll be interesting to see where the appellate process goes, because, of course, we're still dealing with basically the same composition of the U.S. Supreme Court that did overturn Roe versus Wade. Of course, Ketanji Brown Jackson has been added to the court, but she replaced another liberal justice. So the same majority that overturned Roe with the Dobbs opinion would still be sitting on the court ostensibly when this comes to the Supreme Court, if it does. And so I think that this is a major win for pro-lifers. Of course, IVF has been controversial in terms of frozen embryos, but overall, I think this is a really great decision. And so, Auron, let's also shift to a new article that you have posted just a couple of hours ago on The Blaze. It's titled "Know Your Enemy." What is this all about?
Well, obviously, we recently had a bit of a disagreement. Vladimir Putin is obviously not somebody who's big on free and fair elections. And one of his political opponents, who he's obviously been persecuting, has recently died in prison. Now, a lot of people are understandably mad about that. It makes perfect sense. But at the same time, people pointed out that the United States has lost its moral authority to go ahead and issue pronouncements on this kind of behavior because of what is happening inside our own system. Now, a lot of political commentators, even some conservatives, some politicians, got very angry that this was being pointed out by people on the right. But I think they're absolutely correct. Yes, we understand that at this point, it's not as bad as it is in Russia. However, any politicalization of your justice process, any weaponization of things like the Department of Justice is incredibly dangerous to the idea of having a democratic process at all. And the fact that we can't, with any moral authority, call out others because we are directly engaged in very similar behavior is very bad for the world.
Yeah, and I think it's really fascinating to see that some people are saying that conservatives shouldn't call out bad behavior of other countries where it lies because we've lost moral authority. I mean, in a sense, I think that's definitely true when we look at our own Justice Department, when we look at our own system of justice that used to be the hallmark of the example for the rest of the world. And now with so much lawfare going on, it's really not. But conservatives, Auron, are calling out our own system of justice. We're wanting to create a more perfect union. And so for conservatives, I think we need to continue to call out our own system, but also call out other countries when they're behaving immorally as well.
That's fair enough, but I think, the point is that we have to clear the log in our own eye before we point out the speck of dust in our neighbors. It's our duty to take care of our country first. Yes, I'm sure Vladimir Putin is a very bad man doing very bad things and has no interest in my country or very bad plans for my country. That's not in question. But the main concern is what is happening here in my own home country. And until that problem is taken care of, I'm sorry, people will talk about how we can walk and chew gum at the same time, but it's very clear that we can't because we're allowing this kind of weaponization of the justice system inside our own nation. And I think all of our efforts should be totally focused there. I understand the desire to acknowledge the terrible things that someone like Putin is doing, but I am far more interested in making sure that the people in my nation are represented, that they have the freedom of speech, that they have the ability to participate legitimately in the political process than I am with condemning a foreign leader when it's really not doing anything other than pointing out our own hypocrisy.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely a fair point that we should always be concerned about what's going on in America first. For example, protecting our own border first, making sure that we are expending our time and resources on our own country and our own sovereignty before we are doing anything like, maybe funding Ukraine and the war over there and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And so a lot of this does seem geared in calling out Putin just to justify America's continued support of Ukraine.
Exactly. And of course, we also know that the Russian collusion narrative, while it has been refuted many times and shown to be a democratic conspiracy, really, continues to be used, continues to be parroted. You can still see people on MSNBC pretending like all of this is very real, and they use it to go ahead and incite their own base to make all kinds of insane accusations. And so I think that they're going to continue to push this narrative, and they're going to continue to use events and antagonism towards Russia to go ahead and drive, like you said, continue funding in places like Ukraine and Israel. We're going to continue to see the American taxpayer have their money shipped abroad, have their border ignored, while real problems are happening back here again in the United States. And so, again, while I totally understand people's concerns about what is happening in Russia and the way that Vladimir Putin treats his people and his political opponents, really, honestly, the hour is very late here, and we just don't have time to criticize the misdeeds of other leaders while we watch the Biden regime simply could destroy what's left of the American justice system.
Yeah, and I really wish that Congress would move forward with the impeachment of Joe Biden. And they're somehow just focused on Secretary Mayorkas. I have said that, that's really not a great tactic, in my opinion, because Biden will just replace Mayorkas with someone else if he ended up getting removed. So why isn't Congress and Republicans more focused on what's going on in America than they are with condemning things overseas? And we only have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you're right that the correct target would be Joe Biden. Obviously, the Democrats do not hesitate to go ahead and bring ridiculous impeachment charges against Donald Trump. There's no reason not to bring legitimate charges against someone who is absolutely facilitating an invasion at our southern border in the United States.
Yeah, really well said. Well, the piece is called Know Your Enemy, and it's up at The Blaze. And I would encourage you to follow Auron Macintyre and read everything that he writes, like I do in The Blaze, because we always want to see what conservative commentators are saying. Even if you don't agree with it, it's always great to be informed. And that's why you're tuning in to SNC Tonight. We'll be back with more right after this. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Early voting in some primary states has already begun, with Texas starting their early voting yesterday. So joining me now is Matt Rinaldi, who's the chairman of the Texas GOP. So Matt, what does this look like for Texas, and what are some races that we should be following?
Well, I think first and foremost is Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan's primary. as well as there's probably about 20 to 25 or more competitive primaries among House members who are aligned with Dade Phelan, some of whom voted against the governor's school choice proposal, several of the races where Trump has been involved as well. But it all boils down to dissatisfaction with the way House Speaker Dade Phelan's running the Republican Party. He, unlike any state legislative body in the entire country, appoints a significant number of Democrats to state chairmanship positions. He appoints a former Obama lawyer to be parliamentarian and control the House parliamentary procedure. And Republican voters are sick of it. He was censured by the state party. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is in the race, opposing the Speaker of the House and supporting David Covey. Donald Trump endorsed against the Speaker of the House. I think it was his first state legislative endorsement ever. I personally have endorsed against Dade Phelan, and the state party has been running ads in Dade Phelan's district since last January, informing his voters of what the speaker's been doing. So it looks to be a big night for conservatives, and it could reshape Texas for years to come.
Yeah, and hopefully for the better. This has been fascinating for me to see state local politics, especially considering what happened with the sham impeachment of Ken Paxton, that thankfully he survived as Attorney General. But I think a lot of people were really unaware across the country that even though Texas does have a Republican majority, that so many of these chairmanships of committees and other appointed positions were going to Democrats.
Yes. I mean, Texas, I guess last session, the House Speaker appointed 40% of the committee chairmanships to Democrats. And these aren't like moderate Southern Democrats either. These are like, he appointed a Black Lives Matter activist to chair the Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence. Okay. And what's one of the biggest issues for Republicans right now? Crime in our cities. And he put a radical leftist in charge of the committee. So, it's looking really promising that there's going to be a Republican voter wave against this sharing of power arrangement in the House, and we'll see what the results are.
Yeah, well, we can hope. And if you are in Texas, you're definitely going to want to participate in voting and vote in any way that obviously is legal and that you can participate in, which brings me to an interesting point, Matt Rinaldi, because last night, President Trump was in a town hall forum with Laura Ingraham on Fox News, and the issue of mail-in voting and also voter fraud came up. This is what Laura Ingraham asked President Trump and his response. Watch this.
Speaking of that, how are you going to make sure that mail-in ballots and voter fraud, which we heard from a lot of people in line, was an issue front and center? They're very concerned about mail-in voting. So forget the past. What are you going to do to make sure we don't have problems going forward?
If you have
RNC?
mail-in voting, you automatically have fraud. If you have
okay, well, there's mail-in voting in Florida,
That's
and you
right.
won huge.
That's right. If you have it, you're going to have fraud.
But you won.
Because you don't have any. When you go into a voting place, like you go into one in a properly run state, they look at you, they give voter ID, you give all sorts of identification. I mean, it would be very hard to cheat in a mass scale. When you send out millions, like California, I think they sent out 36 million ballots. They don't have a voting booth in the whole place. And then millions of ballots come back. Nobody knows where they're coming from.
Right, but what are you going to do about it?
The way you win is by swamping them. The way you win is by swamping them. You got to have, and we're going to swamp. I'll tell you what, I did great in the first election. I did much better in the second.
We have interesting news coming out of New York, by the way.
So this is really interesting, Matt Rinaldi, on several points, because, just saying swamping them, I don't really think is necessarily a policy solution or consideration. But I think he's right about mail-in voting being a danger. So, for example, even in my experience, I moved to Florida last year from my home state of Colorado, which does universal vote by mail. I just got a notification from the Colorado Secretary of State that my ballot is being sent to my former address, even though I notified Colorado that I had moved. So this is clearly a problem, but there are states like Colorado and others across the country that do participate in vote by mail. So if President Trump's suggesting that, we shouldn't participate in something that actually is the form of voting, then I think we're going to see we're losing a lot of potential Republican votes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Texas GOP supports single-day voting, in-person voting, mail-in ballots only upon cause, and voter ID. However, while the elections are conducted the way they are currently conducted in Texas, we have mail-in voting for voters over 65 and for under 65 for cause. We have a robust mail-in ballot program. Last election in 2022, we had our most successful election for Republicans in Texas since 2014, since the Tea Party movement. And we won statewide. We won mail-in ballots in every statewide office. We won early votes in every statewide office, and we won election day votes in every statewide office. And that's because under the rules we have, we're going to play to win, and we're going to fight aggressively to win under those rules. While at the same time, we want to change the rules to a system that has a greater likelihood of having less voter fraud.
And I think that really is pointedly the best solution, is that you have to play by the rules as they are while still advocating to change the rules to create a better system. Because if we're playing by a set of rules that we wish were in place, then we're simply ceding some of that ground to the opposition. Much like any kind of sports game, you may not like the rules, but you have to play to win.
Yeah, I mean, and you see the differences between, states like Arizona and Texas, where Arizona had perhaps 70% of the Republican votes come in on election day. However, there were problems on election day. They didn't bank those votes early, which caused problems for both their statewide candidates. Meanwhile, you have states like Nevada, where Republicans didn't aggressively ballot harvest, even though it was legal there. And then in 4 California congressional districts, Republicans did ballot harvest, and we swept those 4 districts. So we need to play aggressively under the rules we have, while at the same time seeking to change the rules to make them more fair.
Matt Rinaldi, chairman of the Texas GOP, will be interested to follow the results of the primaries. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be right back with more of SNC Tonight. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. As we continue to follow the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, this headline came out of social media today that Israel bombed Syria again today. They used a precision missile, which shows they could have used these type of missiles in Gaza, but their plan is to genocide. That's really a strong word. And now coming out of Cuba, Cuba is now blaming the United States for the ongoing war in Israel. Listen to this.
The United States of America, responsible under international law for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the apartheid regime that determines where people can live, work, and move around depending on their ethnic, and religious backgrounds. Members of the court, we and you bear the high moral, historical, and legal responsibility to pronounce ourselves in a clear, transparent, and forceful manner on the ignominious situation of the Palestinian people and to demand international responsibility for what is happening in the occupied territories.
Josh Hammer is a senior editor at large for Newsweek and host of The Josh Hammer Show, and he joins me now. Josh, what do you make of all of these comments that are very pro-Palestine, and now suddenly Cuba is blaming the United States for so-called genocide in Israel?
Yeah, Jen, there's a lot to unpack with what we just heard and saw there. First of all, I would submit that when you're on the opposite side of the Cuban government, which is one of the scummiest, most immoral, most gross human violators, I mean, one of the absolute worst governments on the face of the earth. Just to start with, when you're on the opposite side of Cuba, you're probably in the right here. Second of all, that tweet, and I have no idea who that account is, who is going ahead accusing Israel of genocide, which seems to be a trendy thing to do in far left circles these days. You know, they're saying that, oh, they happen to have precision-guided missiles. You know, what do you think Israel's been doing in Gaza for the past 3.5, 4 months since this operation started? Israel has a technology where if they wanted to drop one bomb and vanquish and obliterate Gaza, they could do that within minutes. They obviously have the technology to do that. The fact that they have not done so, and there have been 230 to 240 plus IDF soldiers who have tragically paid the ultimate price. The fact that they're going door to door, that they're dropping leaflets onto buildings, that they're calling innocent civilians, telling them to flee, that they're postponing their ground operations in cities like Gaza City, like Khan Yunis, like Rafah, where the current fighting is taking place. They're postponing all of that to make sure they have safe civilian corridors. They are going above and beyond. You know, Jenna, at Newsweek, where I work, we had a wonderful piece a couple weeks ago from a professor at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, a guy by the name of John Spencer. I believe he's the chair of their urban warfare department there. His op-ed for us went viral, and thankfully so, because it was a great piece. And he explained that from his perspective, in the entire history of warfare, again, he's the head of the Urban Warfare Studies Department at West Point. He has studied this for decades. He said that no country has ever fought a war of this urban magnitude door to door quite like Israel. And he served multiple tours in Iraq. He said that what Israel is doing in Gaza from a strictly humanitarian perspective in terms of saving civilian lives is above and beyond what even the United States did in 2016, 2017 in Mosul when we were fighting ISIS there. So these allegations are just truly backcrap insane. They're coming from an intellectually disingenuous place, a very far left immoral place. And again, like I said, when you're on the other side of Cuba, which is having the tenacity to accuse America somehow, I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. The only thing that the Biden administration can currently be faulted for is not for supporting Israel, but for lack of support and for teasing to the media the idea of trying to create a now so-called independent Palestinian state, which would have the obvious effect of rewarding the very perpetrators of the mass slaughter of Jews, Arabs, Christians, and all the above on October 7, 2023. You're literally going to reward Nazi-esque war crimes. It's absolutely horrific stuff. That is what you can accuse the Biden administration of doing wrongfully. You definitely can't accuse them of being complicit in quote unquote genocide. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, and this is why, Josh Hammer, one of the drawbacks of social media is that there is a lot of amplification of a lot of these very biased and I would say truly false opinions. I mean, this account, Suleiman Ahmed, he is one that, I mean, calls himself an investigative journalist, but he has over 400,000 followers and is generally one of the co-hosts of Mario and Nick Sorter's Twitter Spaces, or X now, the X Spaces, and so has a lot of followers that look to him for news, but clearly this is shaped by opinion and it's very biased. And so when people are looking for actual news, not this kind of leftist bias, you know, this is why they want to tune in to sources that really understand what's actually going on in the Middle East.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I mean, you know, Jenna, thank you for teasing my show, The Josh Hammer Show. We've had any number of guests on my program over the past few months since October 7th who are trying to give a very in-depth perspective. I actually just had Yair Netanyahu, the prime minister's son, on my most recent episode of my show that aired this weekend. We've had any number of others join the show to give a more well-balanced perspective. I actually had the former 25-year director of the Mossad's counterintelligence division, someone who knows what he's talking about when it comes to urban warfare in places like Geneva Ukraine, Nablus, Gaza City, places like that. So he gave a great perspective. Certainly, you're doing so on this show as well. So there's no shortage of good places to go to. Just to kind of tick off a couple of names here, Eylon Levy is I think he's officially a spokesperson for the Israeli government, but he's a very smart guy. He was that guy who did that eyebrow raising thing on TV that went viral a couple months ago. His social media accounts are indispensable. He has a new podcast out, I believe, as well. Douglas Murray, of course, the New York Post, a Spectator, has been doing absolutely sensational work on this conflict basically ever since it broke out there. He's been a must follow. I actually was pleased to interview Douglas myself when I was over in Israel just over a month ago. I met him in Tel Aviv, really kind of talk with him about what he saw on the ground there. He's a must follow on this as well. So there's no shortage of good people to actually look to. It's only a question as to which accounts, to your point, Jenna, actually get amplified in the social media algorithms these days.
Yeah, and a lot of that is really unfortunate when you see people who get their news from just scrolling whoever is amplified on their X feed or their Facebook feed or, however the algorithm is designed to promote. That's why we always have to be careful to look to the bias, know who we're listening to. And that's why you're an indispensable resource as well, Josh Hammer. I read everything that you write in Newsweek. And, occasionally we have our little bits of disagreement. That's okay. The conservatives can disagree with one another because we at least agree on the fundamentals. We agree on a need for a moral and upright society, for truth telling, for genuine fact checking, not just bias checking. And so that's why a lot of these things, especially when it comes to conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere, we always have to make sure that we're looking at who the byline is, who the author is, and making sure that we're getting perspective that is that genuinely is coming from a truthful and also conservative perspective. So you can follow Josh, Josh_Hammer on all social media, and also the Josh Hammer Show and Newsweek. We really appreciate him joining to give that incredibly important perspective. We'll be right back with more here on S&C Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. The Biden administration is hyper-focused on promoting DEI and indoctrination in public schools, and even some private universities are continuing to advance the woke agenda. This first headline is coming from Fox News, and it says, Rhode Island teacher sounds alarm on DHS-funded, quote, media literacy program she says will indoctrinate children. The so-called media literacy program was hyper-focused on former President Trump and other Republicans, the teacher claims. Harvard University is also participating in kind of this woke push, and this exclusive just dropped yesterday in Pedro Gonzalez's Contra Substack. This is the headline exclusive. Harvard alumni demand university, quote, commit to DEI in all facets of university hiring and admissions. A letter obtained by Contra outlines a series of demands made by a group of Harvard graduates. So joining me now is the author of that Substack, which is Pedro Gonzalez. And Pedro, it seems like this push for both public schools and private universities that are partnering with the Biden administration really and pushing DEI is all about just indoctrinating students.
Yeah, that's right. Jenna, thanks so much for having me. So in the case of Rhode Island, you have this initiative that runs from the University of Rhode Island's Media Lab and DHS putting on this workshop through Courageous Rhode Island. And so you have this whole chain that follows all the way up to the federal government and down to your local public school. But why is this news? Because on the surface, it's basically just leftists doing what leftists do, trying to brainwash your kids. But it's important to understand that DHS connection, because this workshop that was put on by Courageous Rhode Island for these K through 12 teachers, it was done with a $700,000 grant from DHS. DHS's mission, a large part of it, is basically countering threats to the homeland, right? Which includes extremist threats and terrorist threats. Most people think of, Islamic insurgencies or things like that, like lone wolf terrorism and stuff like that. But in a way, the federal government views you as a Republican, as a conservative, as a kind of like terrorist in waiting, and that you're actually sort of doing what the Taliban does and trying to groom the next generation of extremists, basically just by raising your kids in a way that is not consistent with how Democrats and the left think that you should raise your kids. And that's important because a teacher who participated in this workshop put on by Courageous Rhode Island, her name is Ramona Bessinger. She was actually one that broke this story in Legal Insurrection, and then Fox News picked it up. But what Ramona saw was that all of the talk, all of the workshopping about extremism focused entirely on the Republican Party, conservatives, and Donald Trump. Basically, it was as if the 2020 George Floyd riots had never happened, and that there are no meaningful instances of terrorism or extremism from the left. Like the guy that shot at Republican congressmen while chanting that healthcare is a right. His name is slipping my mind right now, but he nearly killed a handful of Republican congressmen. Right? Never happened. As far as this workshop and apparently DHS is concerned, not a real problem to be worried about. That kind of radicalization, that depriving people of healthcare, which is a human right, basically becomes the basis for people that are already sort of on the edge to snap and go kill people, right? That's nothing that we have to guard against. The only meaningful threats in this country are entirely coming from the right, from the conservatives and the Republican Party. That, in a nutshell, was what this workshop for K through 12 teachers is about. And basically, and this is another important part of it, it's not just that they view the parents of these kids as sort of like problematic and potential extremists. It's also that there are basically kids who are viewed as belonging to the outgroup, kids who are not, in other words, on board with the program, whereas other kids are conforming, the outliers. The workshop also focused on basically how do we sort of break these kids down and mold them into what we want them to be, to bring them into the so-called in-group. Again, and this is the most important thing, on the surface, you want to dismiss this story because it's not really news. But this is the key takeaway. It's being done with your money. The federal government is funding this stuff. You don't get to opt out. You might not want to partake in the culture war, which is totally understandable. It's exhausting and often dumb, but it's still happening. And they're doing it with your money. In other words, they're coming after your kids with your money. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, and this is why conservatives have to be very concerned about the infiltration, really, of cultural Marxism, because this is a classic point of Marxism, that they come after the family, they come after your kids, they come after private property, and they also want to infiltrate churches as well. And so when we're seeing things like this, what can be done to change some of these issues that are going on in public schools? Obviously, Harvard is a different story as a private university, but even there, more alumni should stand up if they're conservative and sound the alarm on this, to say that even private universities shouldn't be participating in things like a DEI.
Yeah, but they're not going to stop. I think the Claudine Gay incident was so humiliating for Harvard and Gay's defenders because her position really became untenable. Even liberals, right? Even liberals who still believe in adhering to the standards that they demand everyone else observe in terms of academic rigor and things like that, even they were calling for her to resign. Basically, this is too much. There's enough evidence that points to the conclusion that Claudine Gay is something of a prolific plagiarist, and the right thing to do in order to preserve the credibility of the most prestigious university in the United States and one of the most prestigious learning institutions in the entire world would be for Gay to step down. But that's not what happened, obviously. There was this full court press to save her position. Obama himself reportedly lobbied behind the scenes in order to prevent her from stepping down, and then she does. But even when she steps down, I mean, she's still got tenure there. She's still collecting a paycheck. So it was a win in one sense. I think the greatest win of all was the fact that the university and, like I said, her defenders really sort of sullied themselves. They showed that they don't actually believe in the standards that they ask students to uphold, right, with regard to academic integrity and things like that. So, I mean, the next student that gets kicked out of Harvard for plagiarism, I don't know, there might be something there. It'd be amusing to see that end up in court someday, you know, and they can cite Claudine Gay or something like that. But the point is that this was ultimately about power. That's why there was such a powerful effort to retain Claudine Gay as president of Harvard, because it ultimately comes down to a show of power. We can keep the person that we want in this position amid a tsunami of a scandal just to show you that we can. It didn't really work out that way, but even still, now there's this new effort, and this is the story that I published the other day in Contra.
And everyone should read this in Contra Substack. Pedro Gonzalez, really appreciate your insight. We'll be right back with more here on SNC Tonight. And finally tonight, there's a very important new book that everyone should read. It is by Jeremy Stalnecker, who is the co-founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation that helps veterans who are dealing with issues like post-traumatic stress disorder. And the book title is Not the Solution: Winning the Battle Against Suicide. So Jeremy joins me now, and this is a very heavy topic, but one that the Mighty Oaks Foundation has just helped so many people with, and this program is incredibly important for veterans. And so Jeremy, walk me through what the Mighty Oaks Foundation does and why this book is so helpful for veterans who are dealing with these mental health issues.
Again, Jenna, thank you for having this discussion. What we do specifically is we work with veterans, active duty service members, first responders, and spouses, the family members of those who are struggling, many of whom are struggling with combat trauma and just the various difficulties related to trauma and coming home. Many are dealing with issues related to trauma in life. And so many of the men and women that we help have been struggling since childhood because of trauma that happened in their childhood that they took into the military. And as they transition or they move through their career, they understand, as so many do, that they lose their identity in the process of moving forward. They lose their purpose. And we know that when you lose your identity and you lose your purpose, so often what that leads to is frustration and anger, isolation, and we're told that it's over 20 veterans a day. Really, the number is probably much higher than that. But every hour of every day, men and women who have served our country in uniform make the decision to end their lives. It's a pandemic that is happening. We talk about the pandemic. The real pandemic or epidemic in our country is veteran suicide. And yet it's so often unaddressed. We've been dealing with this for just over 12 years, and we've seen tremendous success by helping those who are struggling lay the foundation that they need to build. It's really, you mentioned this is a very heavy topic, but I like to think this is a very hopeful book because it gives steps forward for those who are struggling.
Yes, and this is such an incredibly important issue. And for those watching, this foundation is built on the hope that is found by and through the salvation of Jesus Christ. And this isn't just about giving some solutions or, some kind of, therapy that is just dealing with the symptoms of the problem, but truly getting to the only hope for anything that anyone is dealing with, which is through Christ. So how do you approach veterans who join this program and talk to them about the true hope that we do have?
Well, many of the folks who come to our programs are struggling with various issues. It's not all just suicide, but it is hopelessness. And whether that hopelessness leads to self-medication, leads to illicit behaviors, leads to broken relationships, it's hopelessness. And most of the folks who attend one of our programs, and we cover the cost of travel, we cover the cost of the program. We just want them to have access to the program, just like we want them to have access to this book. But when they show up to us, they're there because they've tried everything else and it just hasn't worked. And so the way that we address this is by simply illustrating through our own lives and our own testimonies that when we align our lives to the lives God created us to live, the trauma, the trials, the difficulties, the battles of the past, they don't go away, but they no longer define us. They no longer have us in chains. We're able to move forward because we have a purpose wrapped up, not in who we are, not in our experiences, but in who Jesus is. And you said this so well, that hope is found in Christ. In fact, the Bible talks about our hope, which is our Savior, Jesus Christ. And that is where we must start. So many approach these issues from a clinical perspective, starting with clinical therapies and using medications, other therapies. Those things have their place. But we say we need to start with the right foundation. If those things help, that's fine. But we have to have the right foundation, because unless the foundation is there, the rest of it will fall short. And so we start by talking about our stories and our struggles, and the fact that all of us who are involved with our programs at one time were in a very dark place, learned how to align our lives to the lives God created us to live, and have found hope moving forward.
And every person who has come into a saving knowledge of Christ has a story and has a testimony.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
you're so right, Jeremy, that people, whether they're a veteran or they're just dealing with other sorts of trauma or other life issues. I mean, even things that this audience knows that I've been through in the last few years.
Yeah.
But for the hope that I have in Christ Jesus, I don't know how I could have handled all of the onslaught that came against me. And that's why one of my favorite verses in the New Testament is to be anxious for nothing, but in everything with prayer and thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. So the peace that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Our identity is in Him alone. And of course we identify in other ways. I mean, we have our name, we have our gender, we have our job, we have all of these other things that are found in Christ. But first and foremost, we are children of God, and that needs to be that foundation. So the book is called Not the Solution. And for people who are watching this and they may have a friend or family member who's a veteran, how can they get involved in the Mighty Oaks Foundation?
I think for this conversation, the easiest way to start is by downloading a free copy of this book. It talks about Mighty Oaks. It gives access to our programs. And that's easy. Go to notthesolution.com. There's a free download. You can purchase copies if you'd like to send them out to folks, but you can download one for yourself or for others. And that is an easy way to connect with the truth and the hope that's found in Christ.
Yeah, amen. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for the work that you are doing. And I know my family are huge supporters of the work that you do at the Mighty Oaks Foundation. And so where can people also get a hold of this book?
Yeah, notthesolution.com is the best place to go. But for those who are simply interested in the programs that we have, and we work in the areas of resiliency and really deal with this recovery issue as well, mightyoaksprograms.org is a great place to find us. Everything Mighty Oaks, right? There aren't many Mighty Oaks organizations. So look for Mighty Oaks. You'll find us on socials. You'll find us on the web. And we'd love to connect with you there.
Excellent. Well, Jeremy Stalnecker, thank you so much for the work that you do, for your service to this country, and for your ongoing ministry to the Lord and to veterans. So really appreciate your time today. So, well, that's all the time that we have for SNC tonight. I'm Jenna Ellis, and I'm very much looking forward to all of you joining us continually next week in the 9 p.m. Eastern hour, as this show will be changing its title to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Very excited to be the permanent host of this news hour starting next week. And so you can find us on all of the Salem News Channel platforms. And this show is also going to become my podcast. I know a lot of you who tune in to listen to all of the great interviews and topics that we have from a Christian conservative perspective follow my podcast. And so you can always find that the Jenna Ellis Show wherever you stream podcasts, on Spotify, Apple, any of those things, also at thejennaellisshow.com. But very excited to expand my platform to continue to speak truth from a Christian conservative perspective. So thanks so much for joining us on SNC Tonight, and looking forward to seeing you next week on Jenna Ellis Tonight.